Hello again now. South Africa is facing a reading crisis. A new global study shows that 81% of our grade 4 pupils cannot read for meaning in any language. The Progress in International Reading and Literacy study was conducted on more than 1 million pupils and ranked South Africa among the lowest. So what can be done to rectify this situation? For more discussion, I'm joined by Merit Paul, founder of Time to Read, Basil Manuel from trade union NAPTOSA, and Noncedo Madubedube from Equal Education. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to today, and thank you very much for your time. Noncedo, let me start with you. I mean, these numbers, this research shows that, as I've said, we have an education crisis. How big is it?
Oh, but this is massive. This means that over 80% of children and young people in our schooling system, and this trajectory is perpetuated from foundation to all the other levels inside the basic education system, struggle to comprehend words and meaning in their learning. And what this means is that there'll be generations of young people that become idle, either on the other side of their basic education schooling careers or during it. So this is catastrophic, and not just for school communities in rural parts of South Africa or in the townships, but for everyone that cares about the future of democratic South Africa, for everyone that is interested in safeguards for children in particular, for all teachers and all those that professionally work and are interested in education on the continent, in the region, and particular for South Africa. So the reason we're here is actually to make a rallying cry for South Africans, wherever you are, to join us in pushing the needle on this with immediate effect with our departments of education.
Yeah, we'll discuss, we'll get your ideas later about what are the possible solutions. Basil, let me bring you in there from the teaching profession. Did the COVID-19 pandemic make things worse?
Dan, yes, it did, and massively so. Remember that not only were children out of school for a protracted period, but even when we returned, against the many voices that said we shouldn't return, we did return. And that certainly helped, but we had rotational learning at that time. So even then, there are many children who did not have a full week at school, the vast majority of our learners. So now, if you just simply reflect back to the grade 1 that was there in 2020, the impact it had on that child did not consolidate reading, has moved to grade 2, but the grade 2 that was there didn't consolidate either. So this is not a problem that is going to get easier in the short term, because we are sitting with a cohort of learners that haven't consolidated the basics of reading because of COVID-19. And of course, we know that we did start off with a deficit already. We mustn't create the impression that this has only happened now. No, before this, we already had a crisis. It's been exacerbated by COVID-19. And of course, COVID-19 has stymied the progress, albeit small, that had been made before that.
Okay, Merit, let me ask you what some may regard as an unwise question. Surely it can't get worse?
Yes, we hope it can't get worse. I think when we address the areas that need to be addressed, it won't get worse. And I think while there are multiple areas that need to be addressed, one of the very important areas is how we instruct reading in the classroom. I think it's important to understand that the 21st century child does not learn anymore through memorization. We need to develop skills that underpin reading success, and children need to develop an understanding of the symbols that they see in written words. As we do that, we can address vocabulary at the same time, and then hopefully we will be on the road of improving reading for meaning in our grade 4 learners.
Yeah, Noncedo, I mean, of course, the government did not cause the pandemic, but the Department of Basic Education has a responsibility here in terms of when we look at the reasons that might have led us this. I mean, putting the pandemic aside, because there was some improvement pre-pandemic levels in terms of the reading for meaning by pupils. What should be government's role?
There are three things that we think are possible here. The one is that our government, and this is not just the departments of education, interministerial, interdepartmental cooperation here, is necessary to ring-fence money, to appropriate and have it used to support literacy and basic numeracy at foundation phase level first. So we need an intervention for foundation phase, but it must have money that is allocated strictly to those kinds of interventions. The second thing is that in the midterm budget, the fiscus for South Africa and the education budget particularly, the National Treasury and the Department of Education had agreed to take and siphon money off for other needs, I imagine, that aren't sort of socioeconomic in the immediate. Take money from basic education, money allocated to things like school infrastructure. Now, if you go and look at the types of schools that have suffered anything between a year to 2.5 years of learning losses in this period, the schools that will reflect these kinds of results from polls will be schools with inadequate, poor infrastructure, overcrowding, awful conditions that disadvantage the ability to comprehend teaching and learning inside of the classroom. So we're seeing a divestment in things like school infrastructure, learning and teaching materials. And so what we're trying to say to government as a whole, you have to plow money back into the education system and ring fence it for the things that we need as basic necessities. Give us adequate infrastructure, fix our schools, allow money to sit for interventions, particularly for foundation phase learning, and to some extent for early childhood development as well. Because another thing that we found, which supports this narrative that this is an ongoing and long-term problem for South Africa, is that about 28% of children in the country between ages 0 and 4 years old are in early childhood centers, development centers, which means that the vast majority already go into foundation phase learning, not having had the basics of the education in centers preschool. So that foundation phase and preschool level needs urgent and drastic attention. We need regulations for it and budget.
Yeah, we did reach out to the Department of Basic Education. The team reached out to them to participate, but they were not able to. It would have been very interesting to hear their voice. Now, the pandemic obviously increased the inequality, but Noncedo is making a very important point here that the better resourced schools did better than the under-resourced schools. In fact, from this research that has been done, the Pearls research, English and Afrikaans schools actually remained the same. They were barely affected. But when you come to African language schools, they got hit very badly. Basil, is it a resourcing thing? Is it a focus thing? Is it a lack of leadership that would disadvantage the poorer schools?
Dan, there are numerous reasons for this, and Noncedo has touched on some of these things. However, let me say, first of all, your poorest schools are text poor. They don't have sufficient readers. Now, if you don't have sufficient reading material resources, you are already fighting against a major problem. Neither do homes of those children have sufficient text. So when we talk about resourcing, we've got to think very carefully about how we resource these schools. But it goes further than that. Our norms and standards allocation, which is the money that schools get, no province is paying over what is the national required amount to schools. And out of that money, schools have to buy these resources. So the schools simply just don't have enough money to acquire what is a very, very expensive resource in reading books. Schools, on the other hand, are trying to protect the little they have. So they don't send these books home for fear that they are going to be damaged, etc., further perpetuating the text poverty at home. But it goes even further, Dan. And here we need to point fingers even at the training of teachers. How good are the universities at training teachers in the science of teaching reading? And I want to say that is where we have a major problem, because universities aren't geared for that type of practical aspect. And if we don't have people who can teach reading, we are not going to fix the problem. So part of it has to be that we've got to see that there are far more people, not only in the junior primary, but in the primary school, because children that pass through the junior primary that have a reading problem can't be assisted by the other teachers because they don't know how to teach reading. And if we don't fix that, the problem is perpetuated. But of course, with all this goes, the problem of infrastructure as mentioned, the problem of overcrowding. If you have 50, 60 children in grade 1, then it is not teaching, it's crowd control. How do you get to that child that started off with being a little behind because they didn't go to a preschool where they could have gained this background foundation? So they start off with a deficit. You are not going to fix that. If you have 60 children, you won't even see that child. So there's a multiplicity of problems. Some of them can't be solved overnight. But let's start with teachers being able to teach reading and, of course, having the texts, not only in school, but the ability to send them home.
Yeah, to give the children access to the text. Now, Noncedo said this is a generational catastrophe. That was in a first answer. Merit, if you are faced with a generational catastrophe of any kind in any sector, but here we're talking about education, especially reading for meaning, you need a plan. And I saw a report the other day in the Daily Maverick says apparently there's no plan. Merit?
I can so agree with what Basil and Noncedo said. Basil, I so agree with you that the teacher training is really lacking. We do teacher training, also online teacher training, and we get so many reports back of teachers that say, thank you so much for equipping us with a method of how to teach reading, because that is what I really feel is lacking. Teachers walk in the shoes of prior teachers. They go into a classroom and they actually do not know how to teach reading. So what we do at Time to Read is we equip the teachers with a method that empowers them of how to go into the classroom. That is something that is so fundamental to a plan moving forward, that teachers are empowered on actually how to do this. Because once we understand that, then the journey becomes so much easier. And actually, it does not need to be expensive at all.
Yeah, I saw a report in Daily Maverick saying that there's a need to recruit, as you said, and train and equip teacher assistants. Apparently, Limpopo province, Basil, I don't know if you know about that. They've done so, and it's helpful. We could invest there as well to complement or supplement, Merit, what you have just said. Basil?
Dan, yes. We have had a project of teacher assistants, and of course, this is part of the Youth Employment Initiative. Now, one of the problems is, of course, that these people are not permanently there. However, we've got to also guard against people who have not been trained as well to assist. We need, if the teacher can't teach reading, the assistant is not going to help. All we are doing is we are breaking up the class a little more. We have somebody assisting, but we need basic training done. This is not rocket science.
Yeah.
But if without that training, it's
a problem.
Not going to
But
happen.
what about, Basil, sorry to come in there, what about what Merit was talking about, that when they get involved, the teachers thank you at Time to Read, Merit, you were saying about assisting them. Are you like coaching them? Are you like a teacher coach of sorts in terms of reading, Merit?
Yes, so what we do is, and we want to invite anybody who wants to attend 19, 20 and 21 June to come contact us info@timetoread.co.za to attend our teacher training and to see what it is about. Because there is where we really break down and see what are written words and what are the skills underlying being able to read and what understanding children need. And we really find that teachers walk away so empowered and say nobody ever told them this at tertiary level. They teach them about certain philosophies, but if it comes to practically getting into the classroom and doing it, they don't really feel empowered. So that's what we do for them, to really give them a strategy, and most importantly, the children a strategy that make them feel empowered on how to approach written words.
And is it working? Is it working where you've intervened, where you've cooperated?
It's working amazingly. I wish I would know how to show you statistics. We did a study last year with 24 children in grade 2 that couldn't read. Teachers, a school contacted us and said, we've got 4 classes in grade 2. In each class, there's 6 children that hardly can read. And we did all the assessments under supervision. And after 3 months, they were reassessed. And the lady that supervised us said, okay, I need to gauge these children. How are they reading compared to other children? And she asked the teacher to send average teachers to us to read. And they were, in fact, reading weaker. Our supervisor was so amazed and said, how is this possible that these children that struggled at the beginning of the year are doing better?
Yeah, so we can have solutions like that one. Noncedo, as an activist from equal education in this space, I mean, I've seen reports that in other countries after the pandemic, countries that sometimes we compare ourselves with, like Brazil, the governments there, the education departments or whatever, they came up and say, there is so many billions rands we're going to spend for a catch-up to bring up those who lost the time during lockdowns and stuff like that. What should we be agitating for in terms of real good action that can take our children out of this generational catastrophe?
So there's 4 things I'd like South Africans to support us with. The first is that we need legally binding regulations and norms and law that speak about an intervention for foundation phase reading. We need something that says, this is the material needed, you'll get it in these periods, this is how you'll be supported and evaluated. We need trained teachers, trained and evaluated assistants, LTSMs, this is learning and teaching materials as part and parcel of these regulations across, be it norms and standards for reading in South Africa. And the reason this is important, law upon law, is because we found that it then fast tracks the ability for political leadership, at least, to show some political will and urgency at implementation on all levels of government. And we do need, in addition to regulations around learning, the fast tracking and the realization of norms and standards for school infrastructure. It cannot be anymore in South Africa that we've got above 48 learners in classrooms, in schools that are already in disadvantaged environments. It perpetuates the inequality of our education system. The last is that we do need our government to move away from an austerity fiscal agenda. It's not useful. You can't disempower, disenfranchise, divest in the very people that are meant to safeguard, uphold, and become the very fabric of democracy. And so what we're going to find is a failed democratic project. And as soon as our government becomes illegitimate, then we cause a deep uncertainty around the future of our country. So we really do need business, all departments of government, and the ordinary South African to rally behind us in making sure that we've got strong binding laws and regulations that protect children in this country.
Yeah, I need to ask you, Basil, about the role of us parents or grandparents in supporting the reading capabilities or capacity for children. You've made your points about the need for training the teachers to make sure that there is text available. But, I mean, surely we should take an interest in our homes to help our children to read.
Absolutely, Dan. If teachers, if parents are not involved, and unfortunately, a lot of our parents are employed or looking out for employment, so they're not always there. But they have a crucial role to play, and that is where the grannies and grandfathers come in, about reading to children, about making reading pleasurable. And let's caution parents about the instruments that we put into little children's hands and to keep them quiet, and they never learn how to pick up a book. But in addition to what Noncedo said, I just want to add, if we don't have a methodology that is South Africa's DBE methodology of teaching reading, we are not going to get every parent knowing how to do it, because this grandchild comes back and they are being taught in one way. Another one comes back and is being taught in another way. That is one of our problems.
Okay.
We don't have a single methodology. And even the minister admitted at the release of the Pearl's results that we haven't discovered what works best. Now, there are good things out there. And Merit is talking about a particular plan. And maybe that is the plan for the whole country. But we need to settle on one and get everybody to run in the same direction.
Yeah.
When every other school is doing a different method, we fail.
Yeah, we cannot afford to continue experimenting with the future for our children's with education, the future for our children. We need to make a decision, as you said, Basil. I would agree with that, and stick to it. Merit, your parting thoughts. I mean, is there anything else? Is there any question I did not ask?
Well, I would say I want to invite you. I want to invite Basil. I want to invite Noncedo and anybody that is interested. Come and listen. Maybe we can make time to read the method that we use in South Africa. We're very confident. It's skills-based. The wonderful thing is you don't need to be a home language English learner. It's all languages in South Africa work the same way.
Yeah, the children are affected in all languages. Thank you very much. The Noncedo Madubedube from Equal Education. And thank you very much, Basil Manuel from NAPTOSA, the teacher trade union, and Merit Paul, the founder of Time to Read. Instead of inviting us, Merit, you should be inviting the Minister of Basic Education, Enzi Mutsecha, and her team to come and see what you can do to help. Hopefully they could find a solution there. Thank you once again in discussing this very important matter, which was appropriately described by Noncedo as a generational catastrophe. That's the end of our discussion here on Today this afternoon about the state of reading, of literacy of our children, with a new global study having shown that 81% of our grade 4 pupils cannot read in any language, whether it's Afrikaans, it's English, it's isiZulu, Xitsonga, Tshivenda, Sepedi, Sesotho, Setswana, isiSwati, isiNdebele, isiXhosa, nesiZulu. It's just not happening. And that's a disaster in terms of the future of the kids. So we can do something about it.